Right, microphone on. Gosh, seems like forever since I made a video. What are my views of the new Games Workshop contrast paints? I answer this question and more in this month's Q&A. It's coming right up. Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. And if you're new to the channel and you want to keep up to date with the Wonders of Warhammer 40k, then please subscribe and hit the bell button to turn on all notifications so you don't miss an upload. Right, welcome to this month's Q&A, where I answer all of your questions from the previous episode. But first, I've got a question for you. Okay, so my first ever codex was this one, the Necron 3rd edition codex. And this is my favourite codex I've ever owned. I really, really love it. And my question is your first codex also your most favourite codex? I'm very interested to find out whether it's just me that's really attached to my first ever codex, or whether it's for you also. So let me know in the comments box below, and whilst you're there, don't forget to ask me a question for next month's episode. Okay, so the first question for this month's Q&A is from Leman Russ, and he says, when you're gonna play 40k again? So he's referring to an outtake which I did in one of my battle reports when I played Ace Face, where I said that we are going to play a game of 40k, and it was very funny at the time, and I've actually accidentally said that again afterwards, but I haven't put it into any of the videos. But yeah, 40k, who knows? I'm sure it will slip out again in the future. Next question is from Shane Behrens. Shane Behrens. And he says, I'm not sure if you have had a similar question in previous videos, but Chapter Approved 2018, they have a section for creating your own special characters for open play. What kind of Necron special character would you make and why? Okay, Shane, thank you for the question. I don't do open play at all, so I haven't really looked too much at that character building thing, and I don't foresee myself really utilising it, to be honest with you. So I don't know that there is necessarily a character that I would build. I mean, there is another question coming up which potentially is going to be related to your answer, so keep watching, because I think I might be answering that a little bit more in detail in a minute. So thanks for the question anyway. Of course, there is links to everyone's channel who asks me a question in the comments box below, not the comments, in the description below. So make sure you check out everyone's channel. Okay, next is Capatan Morgan's Wargames, now known as CM Wargames. Of course, Richard, who I play very often here on the channel. He says, now with Necrons getting second and being undefeated at Alamo GT, and the Imps going into round 4, 2 undefeated Necrons sitting in 3rd and 4th place respectively, is the perception that Necrons are in a bad place wrong, and is the reality that though they might not be quite top tier, they are close, and another points drop might actually push them up more? It's a very good question, and Necrons have been doing pretty well now in tournaments. Having said that, I think there's only still a limited list build. Obviously the tournament lists, which are doing quite well, generally have 3 Doomsday Arcs and 3 Doom Scythes in there. Not all of them, of course, but I think Necrons are definitely a lot better now that obviously we've had the points drop, and also I think because maybe some of the other armies around us have been nerfed a little bit, like the Knights. So I think we are a little bit more competitive. As you say, we're definitely not top tier, and I think definitely another points drop would certainly be useful, because We do have some very powerful units, which it's quite difficult sometimes to get all of those units in a list. So for example, like Immortals with Tesla, when they're backed up with all the little tricks, are actually very, very good. However, you've got to put those points into those, and then that can take away the points for other stuff. So I think definitely a points reduction would help gain more troops, more objective secure troops, with all of the toys to go with them, and also give us battalions with CPs. Now, I played a game, of course, against Richard with his orcs, and I had a battalion detachment, and I have to say, having all of those CPs was really useful. I could almost sort of squander a few of them, where sometimes when I play just a single detachment, like a spearhead for example, with those valuable CPs, where I only have, say, 4 CPs, you can only spend them exactly where you want to spend them, so you can't be too frivolous, let's say, with them. So I think definitely a points reduction would see Necrons go up the ladder even more, and yeah, it would be good if it happened. However, I'm not unhappy with the Necron Codex. We've got a few units which are not quite right, like Praetorians, for example, but that always happens with any codex. There's not always the whole codex is really good. You know, there's usually units which get left behind for one reason or another, usually because Games Workshop don't need to sell those kits. Great question, thanks for that, Richard. Okay, the next question is from Pedro, Dodero, Escalante. He says, what books or audio books are you reading or listening to? If none, which ones would interest you? So I used to read quite a lot, and it was all Star Trek books. I've got quite a big Star Trek book collection, over 500 books. However, the last couple of years I've found myself not really reading that much. I don't have the time for it. And the time that I used to spend reading, I'm now on my mobile phone answering comments and what have you. And I don't really miss it, to be honest, that much. I think maybe I should try to get back into reading, but it's just the time factor just really doesn't give me enough time. Not enough hours in the day, unfortunately. But Star Trek books are the ones that interest me the most, because I just love Star Trek and Star Trek stories and the characters, and yeah, I enjoy the books. Great question, thank you. Okay, so next question is from Zombie Dad, and he says, any good Necron lore books or stories? I've never read a Necron lore book or a storybook, so I can't help you here. I'm sure there will be answers in the comments box down below. I'm sure everyone's going to tell you exactly which books you should be reading if you want a good Necron story. But like I said, I don't really read, to be fair. He also says, why Necrons? What is it about them that you love? The lore, the look, their concept, or something else? What drew you to them and keeps you with them? I'm going to go back to what I had in my hands earlier, the old Codex. So I got into 40k, my first ever game I actually played Tyranids. I borrowed my friend's Tyranid army and he played his Orcs. And I really enjoyed that. And there was a little gaming group of people who had specific armies. So we already had an Orc army, a Tyranid army, a Chaos army. He was playing Emperor's Children. And my other buddy that got into the hobby at the same time as me, he had Imperial Guard. So I knew I didn't want any armies which we already had in the little gaming group. So I had a look on the shelf. It wasn't actually a Games Workshop store. It used to be a local toy shop that used to sell Games Workshop stuff. They're not there anymore. So I went into this shop and I basically looked at all of the codexes all lined up on the shelf, and I saw this picture. And I fell in love with this picture. I remember saying to my buddy, I really like the look at those, what's that army like? And bearing in mind this was in 2001, and I remember him saying, oh my god, don't choose Necrons. They're so good. And they were really good back in 2001. Like a top tier army, I suppose you could say. I believe it was Iron Warriors, yeah, and Necrons. He said don't choose any of them, but I couldn't help it. I loved that picture. I had no idea what the rules were about. I just knew I liked it. Now maybe it's because I was a big Terminator fan and they remind me of Terminators. They just look so cool. I mean, I'm looking at that picture now, I'm thinking that just looks so cool. Loved it. And I loved the green rods on the minis as well, because that was really different from all the other miniatures. And although lots of people don't like it, and I can understand why, personally, I really like those green rods. So yeah, that is my answer. What keeps me with them? I just love them. I've got loads of models. I like all the models. I like the rules. In terms of the play style with the reanimation protocol, they're fun to play, and they're just cool. What else can I say? Except Necrons. Come on, Necron girl, give us a Necrons.
Necrons!
He's got 3 questions for me, which I'm going to find quite difficult to answer, I think, because they're all about history. I'm not really into my history, to be honest with you. I did geography at school rather than history, but we will try to answer the questions. So, what's your favourite period or point of British history? Okay, I don't really have a favourite point, but what I will say is I've recently enjoyed watching World War II films, especially the modern ones. When I grew up obviously watching all the old ones. One of my favourite ones was The Dam Busters and Bridge over the River Kwai. I don't even know, is that World War II? As I said, I'm not actually into the history too much, but I'm going to say my answer is going to be World War II, just for the fact that I've been enjoying a lot of the films recently. Outside of UK history, what period of world history do I enjoy? I'm going to say Romans. Again, it's really bad, but my history is all about the films that I watch. But I do enjoy watching sort of the Roman films. So I'm going to say that. Next question is, what is your favourite weapon from world history? That is a very interesting question. Favourite weapon from world history? I don't really have a favourite weapon. Wow, what a question. I am not really into weapons. How about, I'm just going to say the heat-seeking missile. Yeah, that's going to be my answer. Thanks very much for the questions, appreciate that. Okay, next is from Michael Weidner. He says, if you were to bring 3 Catans in a list, would you pick 3 powers, meaning you would only get 1 of each power in your list, or would you take the chance to randomly roll for them? I usually pick, but I've been contemplating rolling to try and get the same doubles or better powers in the list. I'd hate to use command points to switch them with the strat we got, because CPs are hard to get. You're right, and that was a point I was making earlier. CPs are hard to get. Well, when it comes to Catans, certainly if I want it to be competitive, then I would definitely choose the powers, because it eliminates any randomness and it gives you a chance to plan what you're going to do with your powers. So you know, if you know you've got a long range 24-inch power, or if you've got a power which is sort of more close combat orientated, etc., it allows you to then plan where to be at the right time with the army. So I wouldn't go random. However, in my Catan based list, the themed list on Catans, I did roll randomly for a couple of, it wasn't actually the powers, I think it was the split personality, I think, off memory. But I did roll, and I rolled badly, but it didn't matter because it was just more fun. So I think it depends what environment you're in. I'm quite happy to do random things. If you're just playing for fun, why not? You know, you roll for your mission, random powers, random deployment map. Make it all random, why not? Yeah, it just gives you that extra fun element. But if it's anywhere near a competitive type list, you really want to eliminate that randomness as much as possible, even though it might benefit you, because if it doesn't benefit you, then you know you're putting yourself at a disadvantage straight away. Okay, so the next question is from Roldy Kumar, and he says, what would you think of a Wraith-like HQ for Necrons that would buff Canoptic units? I really think this would be a fun addition to the Necron Codex. I love my Wraiths, but would like to have a useful melee HQ to run with them. Okay, so this is the question which I was talking about at the beginning of the video regarding building my own HQ. So you probably already know, but I've already converted a Wraith into a Destroyer Lord model. I did that many years ago because I really liked the Wraith unit, and I feel that a Wraith HQ, you're spot on, would be a fantastic addition. Now, a real melee, fast moving HQ unit. Now, arguably, we've got the Destroyer Lord, and he does sort of fill that role, but I think it would be better if we had a more Wraith-like one which had that 3+ invulnerable save. And I don't think it's out of the realms of possibility to have a HQ like that. You know, basically a beefed up Wraith that can give extra bonuses to Canoptic units. I think that's definitely doable. Now, I don't know if you can custom a character in that chapter approved thing, but to answer your question from earlier, I think that's actually what I would like to do if it was possible. As I say, I'm not sure if it is. But I would like to see that addition to the Codex, or just the Destroyer Lord made a lot better. I mean, the Destroyer Lord is usable with the right relics, etc., but he could be better, and I'd be happy for the Destroyer Lord to be that model because I always use my Wraith Lord. I'll try to put a picture up of him right now. I think he looks really nice, and I would like to see some dedicated rules for that model one day, who knows. Okay, thank you for the question. The next question is from DS Tonks 333, and he says, what's some of your favourite 40k YouTube channels to watch? Who would be your ultimate opponent you would love to have a battle against from one of those channels? Okay, so as I just knocked the table, I've already done a live stream featuring 10 of my favourite channels, and there's lots more, and there will be another live stream sharing more channels that I like to watch. So I've sort of answered that already. However, my opponent that I would most like to play has to be Fritz 40k, or Wargamer Fritz, purely for the fact that he is responsible for me having my YouTube channel. Before I had my channel, he was my inspiration in both 40k and gaming. He's the one who I looked up to with regards to tactics and also videos on YouTube. He used to do battle reports and stuff back then, and yeah, he inspired me to do YouTube, and I think because of that I would absolutely love to play Fritz one day. That would be really cool. Thank you for the question. So the next question is from Orion A, and he says, what are your thoughts on the new Picard series? As a restaurant manager, I'm hoping for a readily available Chateau Picard to run as a feature on the wine list. That would be cool, wouldn't it? Chateau Picard. What do I think of it? I'm very excited by it. I'm still a bit dubious because I've been told that it isn't the Picard that we know. It's a totally different type Picard, probably moved on in life, etc. But I still think that it would be good, and I am looking forward to it. I think I'm more looking forward to a Christopher Pike series, which apparently might be happening, possibly even as just a short trek. But yeah, I'm definitely going to be watching the Picard series. Absolutely, I can't wait. Okay, so the next question is from Mini Warzone, and that is Pete from Mini Warzone, and he says, do you prefer to paint, say, a unit of 5 infantry types, or do you prefer a single model, such as a character or a leader? Got another question as well. Let's answer this one. I've changed over the years, actually. I used to enjoy batch painting quite a bit, and I'm starting to move away from that and starting to prefer to paint smaller units or even single models. And I think the reason for that is my concentration levels are a bit lower than they used to be, and I think that's down to needing glasses now, because I used to be able to paint like 6 hours solid, just sit there and paint for 6 hours. Now 2 to 3 hours, maybe 4 is my maximum, and I usually need to have I normally need to have a break every hour. So I'll do a painting for an hour and I will have a 10-minute break and then do another hour of painting. And I think it's because of that I now prefer to paint less miniatures. It also could be impacted by the fact that I've been trying to paint 36 Noise Marines to a high standard, and that has been really tough to do. So yeah, I'm going to say, I mean, for me a unit of 5 models is quite a small amount of models. If I've got a unit of 10, I would normally just paint 10, but yeah, between 1 and 5 I think is a good amount of models to be able to put all of your effort in. When you're painting to a higher standard, maybe that's what it is, because when I started painting I was painting Necrons. I painted 20 warriors, just dry brushing them, and that's just easy. Painting 36 Noise Marines to a high standard is tough. So maybe that is why. Okay, so Pete also has another question for me, and it is, what are your views on the new contrast paints that should be out now? So my views on the contrast paint. Well, first of all, I haven't used them yet. I've seen many tutorials on them, including Chris Bow, is it? Chris, who did the painting tanks with them using that sponge technique, which actually looks pretty good. From what I've seen, the experiments which have gone on within the community, these paints look actually pretty good. And I've seen Richard's orcs, and I think he painted 100 orcs in a week, just using these contrast paints, and they look pretty decent, to be fair. I mean, anyone who wants to get an army painted quick to tabletop level, and that's all they want, I think these paints are ideal. For seasoned painters like me, I'm going to need a reason to buy them. At the moment I'm painting a commission, and I want to paint that commission to a good standard. I don't foresee me using or needing contrast paints, and indeed all of my armies which are half painted, I've already got my system for painting them. So I don't really want to go out and just buy a paint and experiment with it. If I get into a position where I think, well, I've got to paint this and I think contrast paint might work, I might use it. So I'm certainly not against it. It does seem a bit costly, $4.75 from GW, which, considering you've got to put it on quite thick, I think it'll go through quite a lot of it. So I wasn't quite expecting it to be as expensive, but it's Games Workshop, it's going to be expensive. So I have nothing against it. I think it's got to be good, and if there's going to be more painted armies on the table, then great. But as I said, for me as a seasoned painter, I'm a bit dubious about it. For me personally, you know, I know what I paint and how I paint, and I've got everything locked and loaded. I don't want to be experimenting with new stuff when I've got my systems already locked down. But I will use them eventually, but that is my answer. And that is the last question, so don't forget to ask me a question for next month's video, and if you want to see more Q&A videos, then check out that playlist just there. Beam me up.